I remember the exact temperature of the basement floor against my cheek when I realized I wasn't going to grow up. It was cold, a clinical, unforgiving concrete chill that seemed to pull the remaining heat right out of my bones. I was 13 years old, and I was convinced that my heart was about to explode inside my chest like a glass bulb. At 13, you are a collection of insecurities held together by the desperate need to be seen as something else. I wasn't a kid anymore, or so I told myself. I wanted to be the person people looked at and thought, he's handled himself. He's been there. That's why I was at Leo's house that Friday night. Leo was 16, his brother was 18, and their house was the place where the rules of the world seemed to soften and blur. I sat on a moth-eaten couch that smelled like stale cigarettes and laundry detergent, trying to sit the way they sat, shoulders slumped, eyes half closed, projecting a boredom I didn't actually feel. I was terrified of them, but I was more terrified of them knowing I was terrified. When the bag came out, I didn't hesitate. I didn't even ask what it was. I had heard the names, Molly, MDMA, ecstasy, and they sounded like something from a movie. Something sophisticated. Something that would bridge the gap between my middle school reality and the adulthood I was so hungry for. One of the older guys, a kid named Marcus with light hair and eyes that never stayed still, looked at me and grinned. He asked if I was down. I remember nodding so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. I took the small pressed tablet from his palm. It looked like a candy, something innocent. I swallowed it with a mouthful of warm, flat ginger ale and waited for the transformation. I wanted to feel like a giant. I wanted to feel invincible. For the first 20 minutes, I felt nothing but the usual hum of social anxiety. I kept checking my reflection in the darkened screen of my phone, making sure my hair looked right, making sure I looked like I belonged. I was acting. I was playing the role of the cool kid who does drugs on a Friday night. I laughed when they laughed, even though I didn't get the jokes. I leaned back and waited for the magic to start. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't a feeling of euphoria. It was a subtle, creeping wrongness in the back of my throat. It felt dry, not just thirsty, but like the moisture had been vacuum sealed out of my body. I took a sip of soda, but it felt like swallowing liquid metal. It coated my tongue with a chemical bitterness that made my stomach flip. I tried to swallow again, but my throat felt tight, as if invisible hands were beginning to gently close around my windpipe. Then came the light. The basement had these harsh fluorescent tubes, and suddenly, the humming sound they made became the only thing I could hear. It was a low, electric growl that vibrated in my teeth. The light didn't just illuminate the room anymore, it stabbed at my eyes. Every time I blinked, I saw streaks of neon purple behind my eyelids. I tried to stay calm. I told myself this was what it was supposed to be. I was rolling. That was the word, right? I tried to smile at Marcus, but my jaw felt like it had been wired shut. The muscles in my face were clenching of their own accord, my teeth grinding together with a force that made my head ache. Just relax, I told myself. You're fine, you're cool. But the room began to stretch. The couch felt like it was sinking into the floor, and the walls seemed to be leaning in, curious to see what was happening to me. My hands started to tingle. It was that pins and needles sensation you get when your arm falls asleep, but it didn't stop at my fingers. It climbed up my forearms, into my shoulders, and then settled in my chest. And that's when I felt my heart. It wasn't a normal heartbeat. It was a frantic, irregular drumming, like a bird trapped in a cage, beating its wings against my ribs in a desperate attempt to escape. Thump, thump, thump. Pause. Thud. My chest felt tight, constricted by a heavy weight that made every breath a struggle. I tried to take a deep breath, but my lungs felt like they had shrunk to the size of walnuts. I was breathing shallow, rapid puffs of air That did nothing to clear the fog in my brain. "You okay, little man?" Marcus asked. He was blurry. His face seemed to be melting at the edges, his features shifting and sliding like oil on water. "Yeah," I croaked. The word sounded wrong. It sounded like it came from someone else, someone standing 10 feet behind me. "I'm great, just hot." I was burning up. I could feel the heat radiating off my skin in waves, yet my hands were ice cold and dripping with sweat. I stood up, thinking I needed air, but the floor wasn't where it was supposed to be. I swayed, the world tilting violently to the left. I reached out to grab the back of the couch, but my arm felt like it belonged to a mannequin, stiff, distant, and unresponsive. "He's peeking," Leo laughed, leaning back with a cigarette. "He's fine. Just ride it out, kid." But I wasn't riding anything out. I was falling. The panic didn't come all at once. It arrived in waves. The first wave told me I was going to throw up. The second wave told me I was going to pass out. The third wave, the biggest and darkest of them all, told me that I had poisoned myself, and that my body was finally giving up. I stumbled toward the small, cramped bathroom in the corner of the basement. I shut the door and locked it, the click of the deadbolt sounding like a gunshot in the silence of my own head. I leaned over the sink and splashed cold water on my face, but I couldn't feel the water. I could see it dripping off my chin in the mirror, but my skin felt numb, like leather. I looked at my eyes. My pupils were so large they had swallowed the color of my irises. I looked like a demon. I looked like a corpse. That was the moment the cool kid died. The 13-year-old who wanted to impress 16-year-olds vanished, and in his place was a terrified child who just wanted to be safe. I collapsed onto the floor, my back against the bathtub. The world was spinning so fast I had to close my eyes. But even then, the darkness was filled with geometric shapes and flashing lights that made my brain feel like it was short-circuiting. I couldn't feel my legs anymore. I pinched my thigh as hard as I could, but there was nothing. Just a distant pressure. I was losing myself. I was dissolving into the floor. My heart rate continued to climb, a relentless, punishing rhythm that I was sure everyone in the house could hear. I thought about the stories I'd heard. Kids having seizures, kids' brains overheating, kids never coming back from a night like this. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hands were shaking so violently, I almost dropped it into the toilet. I stared at the screen. The light was blinding, a square of white fire in the palm of my hand. I managed to unlock it, my thumbs fumbling over the glass. I opened the keypad, 911. I stared at the numbers. If I hit call, the world would change. Sirens would come. My parents would find out. The school would find out. Leo and Marcus would hate me. I'd be the kid who couldn't handle it. I'd be the narc. Even in the middle of a life-threatening panic attack, the shame was a physical weight. I was so afraid of being embarrassed that I was willing to risk dying on a bathroom floor. I deleted the numbers. I sat there in the dark, the sound of the party muffled by the door, and I realized I didn't want a doctor. I didn't want a stomach pump or an IV. I wanted to be told it was going to be okay by the only person who had ever been able to make that true. I didn't want an authority figure. I wanted my mother. The shame of that realization was almost as painful as the drug. I was 13. I was supposed to be moving away from her, carving out my own life, being hard. But as my heart skipped another beat and my vision began to tunnel, I realized I was just a little boy who had made a terrible, irreversible mistake. I scrolled through my contacts. My vision was so blurred, I had to squint until my eyes watered to find her name. When I pressed the call button, the ringing sound felt like it was happening inside my skull. 1 ring, 2 rings.
Hello, Jamie.
Her voice was thick with sleep, confused and soft. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. It was the sound of home. It was the sound of a world where I wasn't dying on a dirty rug. "Mom," I whispered. I tried to say more, but the sob that had been building in my chest finally broke through. I wasn't a cool teenager anymore. I was a sobbing, shivering mess of a child. "Mom, please, please help me."
Jamie, where are you? What's wrong? Are you hurt?
I took something, I managed to choke out. I took a pill and I can't feel my hands, Mom. My heart won't stop. I'm scared. I'm so scared. I don't want to die. I heard her moving on the other end, the rustle of sheets, the sound of her feet hitting the floor. She didn't yell. She didn't ask me why I was so stupid. She just stayed on the line. Just keep talking to me. I stayed on that bathroom floor for what felt like hours, though I know now it was only 20 minutes. I told her about the light. I told her about the tingling. I told her how much I hated the way the room was moving. I heard the basement door open upstairs, Leo, or someone checking on me. But I didn't care. I didn't care if they heard me crying. I didn't care if they knew I had called my mother. The facade was gone. The mask had melted away, leaving nothing but the raw, terrified truth of what I actually was. When she finally arrived, she didn't come to the front door. She came through the back, through the basement entrance. I heard her voice, sharp, commanding, and laced with a terrifying maternal fury, telling the older boys to get out of her way. When she opened the bathroom door, I didn't even look up. I just crawled toward her and wrapped my arms around her legs, burying my face in her coat. She smelled like our house, like vanilla, and the laundry soap she always used. The rest of the night is a blur of fluorescent hospital lights and the cold, metallic taste of charcoal that made me drink. I remember the nurses looking at me with a mix of pity and exhaustion. I remember the way the doctor explained how lucky I was that my heart hadn't gone into a lethal arrhythmia. But mostly, I remember the silence of the car ride home. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy. It was the sound of a bridge being burned. My mother sat in the driver's seat, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, her eyes fixed straight ahead. She didn't look at me. I sat in the passenger seat, the drug still humming unpleasantly in my system, making my skin feel too tight for my body. I had survived. My heart had slowed down. My vision had cleared. But something had changed that couldn't be fixed by a hospital visit. I had looked into the abyss of my own stupidity and seen exactly how small I was. I had tried to trade my childhood for a moment of cool, and I had almost lost everything in the bargain. That was years ago. I'm an adult now. I've held jobs, I've had relationships, I've lived a life, but I've never touched another drug. I don't even like taking aspirin. And sometimes, late at night, if I drink too much caffeine or if I get a sudden flutter in my chest, I am instantly transported back to that basement floor. I can feel the concrete. I can hear the hum of the lights. I can feel the desperate, clawing need to be saved. People talk about growing up as if it's a gradual process, a slow climb into maturity. For me, it happened in a single hour in a stranger's bathroom. I grew up the moment I realized I wasn't ready to be grown. I grew up the moment I stopped trying to be a man and realized I was just a child who needed his mother. The shame of that night never really left me. It's a quiet, dull ache in the back of my mind. It reminds me that the person I wanted to be, the fearless, reckless, cool version of myself, was a lie. The real me was the one on the floor, weeping into a cell phone, begging for a way back to the safety of being small. I survived the night, but I think a part of me stayed in that basement. I think a part of me is still sitting there, staring at a phone, waiting for someone to tell me that I'm going to be okay. Every time I see a group of teenagers trying to look older than they are, I don't feel nostalgic. I feel a cold shiver of dread. I want to tell them that being a kid is a luxury they shouldn't be so quick to throw away. I want to tell them that the cool they're chasing is a shadow that can swallow them whole. But I don't say anything. I just walk a little faster, my hand instinctively reaching for my chest. checking to make sure my heart is still beating in the right rhythm. It usually is, but the fear that it might stop, that it might start that frantic bird-like drumming again, never truly goes away. You don't just get over a night like that, you just learn to live around the hole it leaves in you.